Sometimes you just know when you found a kindred spirit. Anne of Green Gables knew the moment she saw people, and she found the sparkle in them, no matter their circumstances. As I'm saying this, my guest Allegra has Kermit the Frog giving kisses to the screen, just so you know. There was a richness that came with the realizing the true potential of a new relationship and the joy that could be found. And the first time I met my guests today, we were introduced because of mutual interests, but neither of us knew that the true introduction would be about our passion for puppets. What do you do when you see someone, an adult, with a Kermit the Frog puppet behind them on the shelf during a virtual call? Or in the front, as Kermit the Frog is laughing, and we also have a dragon that's entertaining us at the moment. You know that they know how to make life sparkle. And it's been a little time since we've talked, but when we knew we had a chance to talk about puppets, we took the chance. Today I'm joined by Allegra Jordan, who supports others in growth and flourishing through governance with integrity. She's worked in 17 countries on 5 continents and supported hundreds of millions of dollars of flourishing. This work is conducted through the Gold Gable Advisors. She teaches leadership and management at Duke University's Engineering School with Master of Engineering Management program, and she's guest lectured at Harvard and the University of Texas at Austin. She's been coined the Mr. Rogers of Rick's Place, where she supported a park for U.S. service members returning from downrange. Her support of play and integration gardens is fostering, building, and supporting impactful civic gardens and parks to support family and community reconciliation and reintegration. Today, we're talking about play and the role of puppets in play and the cathartic power that puppets support in our challenges to thrive and to make a difference in our world. This is episode 1, episode 14, Puppet Power in Business. And this is part of a 3-part series exploring puppet power. This is Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. Hello, Allegra. Now I can officially start. And Kermit the Frog. And Biffy.
Hello. It's so nice to see you. It's wonderful to be here. I can't think of a better way to spend some time. Thanks for having us on in the show.
Oh, this is a wonderful way to start. And I'm always delighted to have a new reason for a podcast and a conversation, and also exploring people beyond what I see sometimes from their business perspective or from their careers. So I like to start with a cup of tea, and I know you have some special pieces there. Do you want to share what you have today?
Oh, yes. Well, my cup today is from Rick's Place. This is the park near Fort Bragg, the U.S. military installation in the world, and actually one of the largest military installations in the world. It's in North Carolina. And as you mentioned, I helped start a 50-acre park nearby to help people play and reintegrate with each other after some pretty stressful times. It was called Rick's Place, and we wanted to have nice mugs. Some of the soldiers have arthritis, so we have mugs that don't have a handle, so that it's easier for them to hold. And we love these mugs. And in the mug, I have one of my favorite teas, Pippi Oolong Stocking. There's a group out of San Francisco that has something called Novelties, and they create these tins that look like books. And inside of them, you get your tea. And so today I'm drinking Pippi Oolong Stocking with you. What about you? What's your cup and what do you have in it?
I was gifted a Choose Love mug at Christmas time. So I've been bringing this back and forth to my desk. And I put inside the I Choose Love tea that my partner and I created for the Choose Love movement as a fundraiser. And this tea actually has a little bit of a pink look to it, and just an aroma that just kind of calms. So I always love to look down to it because of the color that comes out of it. So, yeah.
Michelle, I actually got some of that Choose Love tea. I had heard about your magic with tea. And so I got some of it, but you know what? I haven't taken the time to look at the color. I drink it, I smell it, I enjoy it. But now next time I'm going to look at the color of it. Next time being after this show.
And when it's an iced tea, that's when you notice it, because usually then you have a clear glass. When it goes into a mug, typically we don't get to see the color quite so much. So yeah, you're right. Okay, so now that we're ready, let's have a little bit of chat then about puppets. Do you want to introduce the puppets you have with you today, and how did they find you?
Oh, absolutely. They're my constant friends. This is Biff the dragon. Hello, how are you doing? He looks kind of ferocious, but his voice is kind of shy. And so sometimes we see people who look one way, but they're really nice inside. This dragon found me when I had two sons. They're now grown, and we loved playing puppets together. And this puppet was great. Not only does he have wings, but you could move both his mouth and arms. And so it's really good for running after a small child and saying, I'm going to get you, and give him a hug or a kiss. And then, as you mentioned in the introduction, I love this Kermit the Frog puppet, which I also got about 25 years ago. A little friend next door, she's 7 years old, just moved here from Korea during the pandemic. And she put a little bow on him, because sometimes you can't talk with people in English that much. Sometimes, words get in the way, or words aren't very well understood. And so puppets and playing with puppets allows us to build a bridge between each other. And I just love Kermit. This is just a very well-made puppet with nice arms. But overall, I mean, I just love him being on my Zoom calls. Really professionalizes everything, because they're like, oh, a celebrity. And then I disappoint them with just being me.
And I love Kermit's eyes. They're a white plastic ball-like look, but the way that the actual eye is made it has this look to it, like I understand you. And I know that's kind of odd to say about a set of eyes, but that's what it looks like when I look at it.
And part of that is the plastic is covered with a little bit of felt. So I think that it makes it, if it were shiny, it might not be as welcoming. So there is a softness to the material. And I'm just shocked that the eyes have withstood look so good after 25 years of playing with kids. So it's nice.
Now, how did Kermit find you?
Kermit found me the same way with my sons. I actually did a little bit of work in the mid 1990s with Sesame Street. I had always been a fan. I love Sesame Street. Their songs are so clever. They're always loving. And so I had done a little bit of work with them when I was in business school, trying to introduce them to the internet. They were not so into the internet at that point, but they've caught on. And I've always just kept something from Sesame Street around, because I liked it before I worked with them a little bit. And then when I had my kids, I always wanted to be able to, at any moment, have my little bag where we could do a costume show or a puppet show to enjoy life. It's how humans can connect, through telling stories, through make-believe. Sometimes puppets, of course, can say things that humans can't, and how we can get feelings out with puppets that we can't. And so I still have my bag of, even though I don't have kids anymore, they're kids in the neighborhood. And so I sometimes just have my little bag of costumes and puppets, and we can have a play while walking on the street.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And at a time when right now we do have to keep distance, it's one way to really bring people in without having to necessarily make contact, or to be able to have contact but not really have contact.
It's a way, I think, for adults and kids, or adults and other adults, to relieve maybe get out of the pressures of every day. Maybe the sky is gray, maybe it's cold, but it adds this dissonance to life that is really pleasurable. It's like, okay, I didn't expect that. And you know what? That brings me to a space in my life that is pleasurable and friendly. And life is now a little bit more bearable, because I had this, unexpected interaction that was great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about play. You and I chatted about that the other day, and your wealth of knowledge about play is amazing, but it really does bring a different perspective to why we do play.
Well, I know that we only have a limited time. So I'll start with a quote from Dostoevsky, and I'm going to just summarize this quote. So Fyodor Dostoevsky was a Russian in the 1800s. His life was terrible. Life was really, really hard. And he wrote a series of books that are known as the masterpieces of literature, world literature, and a lot of them deal with suffering. And so he really knows suffering. But he says in one of them, the Brothers Karamazov, he says, if a person has one really happy moment, perhaps from childhood, one of these golden moments where you played and everything was right, that is more valuable than your education. That is more valuable than just about anything people can do for you. It may be the means of your salvation. One moment of coherence in childhood. And from that, I realized that if we can get in touch with a memory of beautiful play when we were having so much fun, nobody was telling us what to do. We got to have fun in whatever context it was and really live with that memory and engage with it. So we think about how it smelled and maybe what it felt like, what we saw, even what it tasted like. That can be the means of our salvation. And that really struck home with me because I do have an elite education, but I've also suffered. And in thinking about what's more valuable to me in that moment where I have to say, is my yes going to be bigger than my no? What gives me some extra oomph is often not my training, but it is the sense that I do know what good and coherence and love and fun feel like, and I can get back to that. And so it allows me to persist, have resilience. So that's the theory. And then what happened was that I was approached. I come from a military family. It was a Vietnam military family, so in the 70s. And then I wasn't involved with the military at all for about 40 years. I moved to North Carolina, and some service members through some work at Duke got in touch with me and said, we're over deployed. We're losing our families. Our relationships are in tatters because we have a really stressful job. And these are very stressful service jobs. It's the military. And we go away and come back. Our families are all stressed and we're losing them. And we don't want to do what, unfortunately, too many people do. Have relationships broken with your kids, with the loved ones, because if you have broken relationships, you can't perform as well downrange, but you also, who cares about your work? Your life is in a mess. And we want those relationships that help you be at your best as a human and at work, be strong. And so, the soldiers said, we go away, and some of us have even committed suicide because we lose our ability to have confidence that we can have good relationships. And it's terrible. So what we decided to do as soldiers was we don't want to sit on a therapeutic couch. We want to go play with our families. We know that playing in nature can reconnect us faster than just about anything. And we saw that with regularity, that play did things for families or for friends, or even for service members who were just out there to volunteer. They saw what success looked like over and over again, and it was fun and instantaneous. You didn't have to force anybody to do it. And that success led people to want to continue to have relationships that were, once again, easy and light. A few hours of well-constructed play could do for families or for friendships what probably years of therapy couldn't, because in therapy, you talk about it. And I'm all for therapy. I've had quite a lot of it, and it's been very beneficial. But to be able to just put a kickball in the middle of a group and say, see, we didn't forget how to play. We still remember it. Yes, bad stuff happened, but we still remember it. And guess what? You know what? I actually like you. And having that come back up led to a reblossoming of so many relationships. In fact, it was that simple idea, let's go to a field and play, became one of the most effective interventions that the U.S. military has in terms of helping people reconnect to their well-being. Yet just yesterday, a 3-star general was visiting West Point, and he had a kickball with him. And he tweeted to me, and I tweeted to him, hey, could you do some water kickball there? And water kickball is just putting slip and slides between the bases and having kiddie pools as the bases with some water. It's a lot of fun because it puts that dimension of slipping and, you got to have good knees to do this. Okay. But, it's a lot of fun. And so you take just this normal thing and you suddenly are playing in a different way that brings lightness. Well, here you go. I'm going on about it. I'll just say one more thing about play, which is that when kids or adults learn to play, Brian Sutton is a world expert on play. And he said, when we play, it masks how hard we're actually working. So for me to actually pick up this dragon and think of a storyline, to move my hands, to get it right with the camera so that it could actually interact with someone else, I'm actually working pretty hard, but because it's fun, it's masked. And one of the benefits of play and why play is so good to have the play mindset at work is because we actually do a lot of hard work. It just doesn't feel heavy like some work can.
And I was just commenting about that because as soon as I said, when I'm doing all of the tasks that need to be done for the week, I'm really focused in and that tension is there. But as soon as I said I got to go play with puppets today, it was just like, whoo, the whole world just lit up, So definitely that completely transforms how we experience things and also how we're going to approach things afterwards. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about how you've been using puppets and their idea within the work that you do.
I have several ways that I've been going about it. And one is just super simple. When I'm on Zoom calls, and I'm on a lot of them, once in a while, I'll put Kermit up there. So when we come back from break, Kermit will be there instead of me. It's good for a laugh. And laughter is the sweetness of life. And so it's okay to laugh. And in fact, humor, good humor, positive humor is a character strength. We often don't talk about it, but allowing people to have a little laugh is a good one. A second one that is really important is in working with people when we're talking about a serious subject. And I'm an executive coach, so sometimes we do get into some pretty serious things. Sometimes you need to just kind of change the energy of the discussion. And so if the client allows it, we might say, it's been pretty heavy. How about if we ask Kermit to come in, or Biff the dragon to come in, or maybe they have a puppet. And I've learned that in working with primarily engineers right now from all over the world, a number of people, especially in this era of Zoom meetings and isolation, they will have a stuffed animal with them. And these are really serious engineer. So I'm holding up a little stuffed chimpanzee. I call him Vroom on Zoom. And I have him around. And so when I see a person like, a really serious quantum mechanics engineer, and they have like a stuffy on their bed, I know that in some ways that they have loneliness and that they want to be with something that is safe. And so it's a sign to me, and I try to normalize that. Here is this sign. In fact, my husband was in the hospital for 2 weeks with a blood transplant in October. And one of the heads of family programs for Joint Special Operations Command at the United States, again, that's a pretty serious group. He gave my husband a little bear called GW, and Ted had it in his hospital room. And he noticed, a lot of challenging times right now, but that little bear being there softens the room. Ted was in isolation for quite a bit for 2 weeks. And he's like, I really liked my bear. I would just start talking to it. That doesn't mean that Ted is crazy. It means that humans have a need to connect and that it's okay. Very serious people, Joint Special Operations Command, share teddy bears with each other or soft plush animals. Now, those are not puppets, but they're used in the same way as a puppet, which is to have a conversation that might bring relief and joy and a little lightness to a situation. And finally, I'll say that I worked with kids at a survival. We taught survival skills to kids of special operations soldiers, and these service members, they can't tell their kids what they do. It might really frighten their kids. So the kids don't really have this. They just know that their parents are service members, and we would use puppets in a couple different ways. One is that when we taught land navigation, we would say, find the puppet, and so they would find their friend. They would find the puppet, and with joy, they'd see the puppet and know that they had completed the land navigation task. So that was one element. The second one was to actually get them to tell stories. We wanted them to tell stories because stories are a life skill. If you can tell a good story, suddenly you have a lot of power in a conversation. And if you're a kid, power through story or through humor is really important. Kids don't have much power, but being able to tell a good story is part of that. The other thing is that we wanted to listen to them, because sometimes they might say something to a puppet that they would not say to an adult. And that might be a clue about how we might help them. We might find out that, their puppet's really grumpy and yelling and maybe beating up on people. What's going on there? And we might find out that in their home, somebody is yelling. Maybe, there's lots of reasons to yell at home, but of course, with service members, we might worry about the effect of coming back from war leading to outburst of anger, a very normal thing for anybody coming from a high stress situation into a situation where maybe, the home is a little chaotic and that happens. So, but we want to be able to be attuned to that. And the puppets allowed us to hear that. So those are a couple ways that there are many more. I'm going to be teaching a class in person at Duke University, again, to an auditorium full of engineers. And I'm going to, of course, bring stuffed animals and puppets in a bag. So when it's appropriate during the lecture, it's always nice to have props, and these are great props.
and that's just as you say that, one of the key pieces as a dance studio owner and instructor was when I traveled down to Florida, and I'm in Canada, so it was a big trip at that time for me to be able to go to Florida. And for creative teaching methods. And one was the atmosphere that you create. So we had glow in the dark things, we had fancy lights, and then the other was puppets. And then we had all these different games that we played. But one of the key things that went with those puppets was how you transitioned the room. So being able to have glowing stars on the ceiling and around the room, turn the lights off, have black lights, and create this atmosphere where no one can really see you. You can see that there's other people, but all of a sudden you're in this other world. And now you can express yourself how you'd like to express yourself, because it's safer, because it's really you and this atmosphere. So you just reminded me of that now. Because I no longer teach in a studio where I have that capability, but I know when I came back from that creative teaching conference, I completely transformed my entire studio. I changed the colors, I had the black lights mounted in, but I also created the shelves that had all of those props in place that you could easily start a conversation and build the storytelling. And that was when choreography transformed from, here's a dance step, and you need to know how to do this proficiently, to what story do we want to tell? What character do we want to be? How do we want to dance that step? So it was no longer about being perfect and getting that step right, or the whole unit had to be all together. Now it was about, here we're telling this story. What is the voice you have? What's the voice you have? And then there was none of this evaluation. So just as you were saying that just reminded me of that whole piece and that transformation of creativity that happens. And
I'm taking notes. Oh my gosh. I love what you said about how do you set up the room. And I'd like you to know as well that in business workplaces, what you just described going on, the transition in choreography is going on in the best workplaces. In the worst workplaces, it's still bad. But we urge people in our class to be intentional about working for places that have really thought about what kind of team culture they want. And the idea that the world used to not be so complex. and a manager could tell the people that she managed what to do. That world doesn't exist anymore because technology has made it so complex. No one person can know everything. So you have a number of subject matter experts on your team, and you then have to go to modern dance that you just described. What's the story we're telling? What's the best way to do it? And that creates psychological safety, which is a buzzword for and a rubric for saying, how can we have honest conversations with each other? Being clear is being kind. So it doesn't mean that we're all going to agree and nobody's going to ruffle their feathers. Everybody is still responsible for their own self-regulation, but we want to have a quality of honest conversation because we shifted from I'm going to tell you what to do to we need to figure out what to do, and as a team. And so I love the choreography. It's a metaphor that you use, and I'm probably going to use it tomorrow in class in front of 50 engineers.
Awesome. I do know that when we went to a festival and performances were up onto the stage, it was the ones that had the storytelling that always did better. And it didn't matter what the skill level of the group was as far as their technical aspects. It was what was their storytelling capability, and that just brought in the audience completely. Particularly, too, if you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So you're waiting to find out what is going through this story and what's going to happen on the end. It's not predictable.
Well, this you've just reminded me of something that's really beneficial about puppets that you can't get other ways. And I was watching the discussion of trauma therapy. In part, trauma is just an overwhelming experience. We all have it. And what we want to do is be able to regulate ourselves in the here and now. And so figuring out what happened is challenging. And the traditional therapeutic method, started by Sigmund Freud himself, identified that, hey, when you write out a narrative with dialogue, you're going to get different results than if you just wrote an essay with 3 points. So if I were to describe myself, I got nervous and then I botched my job interview, that's very top down. But if you use puppets, if you get into dialogue, or even if you just talk it out with somebody else, well, what did you say? What did they say? And getting in the scene allows for a richer exploration to pinpoint where things went off the rails and how you might address things so that you're performing better, you're meeting your expectation the next time around. And this idea of being in scene, it draws us in. In fact, Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, the great master writer from the 1800s, he's so hypnotic in his writing that I try to analyze his work, and I keep finding myself 20 pages into Anna Karenina, like, I got sucked into the story again. I was supposed to be analyzing his omniscient technique, and instead I got sucked in again. And puppets allow us to do that. Anything in scene allows us to do it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So as you're exploring some of the ways that play can happen, is there anything else that kind of jumps out in the work that you've been doing around play?
One of the elements is that it seems to be, I feel that there's a stigma against play because in America, we went through this very superficial play period during the early internet startups. And it was seen that if you had a ping pong table in your office, then you were supposed to be a great startup. And having a ping pong table in your office has nothing to do with being a great startup. It is, fun to kind of, it's fun to bond or do other things, but that's not necessarily going to help you do a great startup. And so, so the stigma against play is something that, well, that's not serious. It's easy to mock play as well. Oh, you're not being serious. We're here to do serious business. And one of the challenges is that if you put a story on top of what you're doing, like I'm going to be serious, you kind of deduct about 15 IQ points from yourself, because creativity and inventing the future requires a lightness of spirit and imagination. And when imagination can come online, good things can happen. But when we have an overwhelming situation, or when we try to pull that negative energy in, to downplay play, then we have a challenge before us because we're not using our entire mind. And imagination is kind of like the last thing to come online for us. And play is one of the ways that we get that imagination going. So in America, we had this superficial idea of play. And then everybody was like, okay, well, we don't have time to play. Take out all the ping pong tables from those internet startups, and what do we get? The mortgage-backed securities debacle. So it really did not track. It was, but so the superficial idea of play is not very helpful. And the expert, I did a lot of research on play, and Brian Sutton and some other experts on play, one of them, Thomas Hendricks, said that there's really kind of a couple different types of play. One is individual play, and I get gratification from mastering something hard. And that could be like building the 600-piece Lego set. A lot of self-gratification in doing that. But what we want when we're talking about the play that will help society the most is when a group can get together and you can think about it. I'm going to get together with a group, and then we're going to do an activity, like sing a song together, something where in that group I have to look and listen and attune myself to each other. Mm-hmm. And then if I'm missing, they're going to call me up. Hey, get over here. You're missed. We can't do this without you. This sense of belonging, which leads to what is known as a sense of blessedness. Like it's almost a religious term, but this kind of play is called communitas. It's about building community. And once I learned the distinction between the gratification of individual play, it might just be me, playing what you can't even play with a stuffed animal as an individual. You're carrying on a conversation, but building a robot, and that's good. But what I turn to in the play park and all my other work is how do we have this sense of anticipation, joy, and blessedness after an event, because that kind of social bonding creates goodwill towards women and men and all people. And that allows us to have glue in our society, glue in our teams. And so I think that's an important distinction about the type of activities that you choose to engage in terms of all play is not created equal. Play has different outcomes. And I think that puppets allow us to do things. And one other thing, I have to get this in. We talk to ourselves when we're doing a math problem, and we might say, okay, 11 plus 4, that's 15, and we speak it, and we're not ashamed of speaking out a math problem. But when we have these big emotional problems, I don't talk to myself. I'm not a person who talks to myself. Well, it's like, you talk to yourself while doing a math problem. Big emotional problems have to be talked out too. And if I can't talk about it with somebody else because I have shame or I'm scared, I can talk to a puppet and the puppet can talk back, even if it's just me making up my own words. So that's another element that I couldn't leave without sharing. It's like we do talk to each other, or we do talk to ourselves, and that's completely legitimate. And I want to get stigma away from that.
One of the things when I chatted with Irene for the first part of the series, and she was expressing how the preschool children that she's now working with, and her and I have been in the studio industry for over 3 decades, so we've seen a lot of changes over time. But what she's noticing now in those preschoolers is they don't know how to have dialogue. And so, where you used to take your car or your little figurine and you would have a conversation and you would create this play station, they don't know how to do that. They move the play piece, but they don't actually articulate or have a conversation. So what she's noticed is by bringing in the finger puppets, she's able to start to really get them thinking about what kind of things would they say and what kinds of things based on these objects that they're holding, because they actually don't have a context to them. Do you have any experience with that or anything you want to add to that?
Wow, this is mind-blowing. So I work with very high-achieving international students who have sat down 6 days a week, 12 hours a day doing programming. because they've had to essentially climb Mount Everest to get into the class, to get to an international university and to sit in the seat that they're sitting in. And they then want to go into management and leadership. And that requires they know their feelings, be able to talk about feelings, and be able to understand other people's feelings. But they have no training. So they're just like your students who are, in this space of, I'm allowed to talk to the finger puppet. I was thinking about what a great opportunity for, basically, it's role play. A role play allows us to develop empathy that we might not have. It allows us to practice reps with empathy. And we do some role plays in class. In fact, I have a little box of Oscars statues that if someone will do a role play, I'll give them a little Oscar statue. But I think that what you just said is huge. And it's very important for engineers in leadership that, if they're willing to play a little bit, just role plays so that they can understand what other people might think and actually start opening their mouth, because for so much of their lives, their early lives when the brain was forming, they were told, be quiet, master this skill, erase any feelings you have are useless. So forget about them. And they're just taught uselessness about feelings and talking. And so now we're moving into a different phase where if you have to lead people, you need all those skills, and they're starting at a very early level. I think that's brilliant. I'm going to order some finger puppets.
Well, and I have a big basket of them. And every so often, I'll just pull them out and just think, what will I do with these? And one of the ones that actually both Irene and I had worked on a unit with was bugs and insects. And, then you've got the different stingers, right? So the approach that each bug is going to take, which was interesting because which one would sting you, but which one wouldn't. And then how do they go from flower to flower and what is their role? So you start to, bring that into a perspective of relationships. It's a really interesting way to play with them.
Oh, especially in terms of trust. And trust is the basis for any team. And the basis for trust is, am I willing to let you see me? And so my students are like, oh, okay, so now we're going to be all nice to each other. But then I have to say, there are some people who will sting you. We have to be, we want to be trusting, but we also have to use our brains and know that some bugs will sting us. Others will be wonderful to work with, and we need to have wisdom about what that is. So I love what you're saying. It's so applicable to how we learn to invent the future as adults, as engineers. And then I'd also have to say, I think it allows us to explore the moral aspects of life. Like if we throw the puppet across the room, well, okay, we can do that, but we don't want to throw a human across the room. And so there, maybe we can explore, with me, it's people who are inventing mind-boggling technology. And I want them to at least think about what they're unleashing on the rest of us. And so having role play discussions about, okay, let's play this out. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, Kermit gets smashed in this because your invention led to bullying. And did you think about that? And so all of these kind of discussions, they're so important for life, whether or not it's somebody inventing with artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency, or somebody who is just a preschooler. And what you're telling me is a pandemic impact. Kids have changed how they talk to things. They're not talking as much, and that's really challenging. But it didn't just stop with kids. You've given me insight into the class that I'm going to see tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's just so interesting what can be observed when we look through that other lens. It was reminding me of, so I was thinking back to the different kinds of puppets. You and I are both more in tune with the hand puppet. I did have string puppets when I was a kid, and I played with those. And I just posted actually on my Dance Debut Facebook this lovely man who has made some incredible string puppets and how he can manipulate them. And he has a dog that interacts with other dogs, which is really interesting. So if people want to check that out, they can. But what I was thinking about was one choreography that kind of stood out for me at festival again. It was always interesting to go to festival. We had some really creative choreographers in the circle that I kind of ran in. And there was one where the puppet was a full person attached to the feet of the other person. And so as they were dancing, when their feet moved, the other person's feet moved. And of course, you have that lovely story of we can move together in unison, or we can't because you want to move this way and I want to go that way. And then what would happen in that dance, which is a really interesting way to look at the interactions that we have with people through the eye of that kind of puppet. If you have to move together as a unit, how do you make that move? Are you grounded in the movement, or is somebody gesturing and, pulling in one direction, or gripping and holding tight and pulling too close? And then can you find that balance between the two of you of how you want that conversation to go? And that's how the choreography came out. And it was, trying to do the waltz, trying to do the tango, and then what happens with that whole piece. So I'm just bringing that back because, again, that was through a puppet, and how much conversation could be produced out of that little clip.
Well, one of the things I love about this conversation is that people who are new to working in teams don't have vocabulary for what is going on. And so when they see the puppets, when they hear this podcast, when they listen to you, then they can see what their problems are. They can apply it to very sophisticated, challenging problems, which come down to, are we going to work together? Or are we going to each go our own way? But just the clarity of that, it's so kind to be able to give people the moral imagination, the social architecture for what happens. And in doing so, then we allow them to express themselves in complete sentences instead of just like, I don't like people. Well, that's not true. You don't like it when we don't move together. And so how do we stop that? What's the intervention? That is exactly what we talk about in working on teams, and nothing today is going to be invented. The lone inventor is just not going to happen that much anymore. They can invent a patent or something, but it's almost usually done always on teams. So we need that kind of language to be able to express what is going on.
Oh, what a rich conversation. Thank you, Allegra.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited. And again, I'm going to take this tomorrow into class.
Yeah. And it's so, I'm just fascinated by how, the people that you are working with and the kinds of conversations you need to have with them in order to support them in the, like you said, life-changing work that they're doing for us, and really anticipating what is that going to mean for society in the work that they do.
Yes. And the skills that got them to be able to create an autonomous driving vehicle, and they can do that. They're very good. There's a whole master's on that, but they have those skills, but they don't have the team skills because it's been useless until now. And now it's very useful. So how do we get those skills, or let people see that they don't want those skills? And not everybody has to, you do need to have team literacy, but not everybody has to be a team leader and manager. So that's it. And sometimes it's so nice just to be an artist because you get to control everything.
That's right.
That's nice.
And the other part about being an artist is you see the end. You see the end, and you see the whole story that needs to happen to evolve to the end. That's what I really enjoy about all of the skills that I picked up along the way in the arts world. And
they're phenomenal. They're phenomenal. Michelle, every time I'm with you, I learn more. I come away more full, a better human, with a better imagination, and with more hope, because I get to think about our next conversation and enjoy what I will learn the next time.
Yeah. Oh, I feel the same, because you're working in a world, I've worked with kids, I've worked with program development, but you're working in the world where you're applying that to the business people. You're applying that to the people who have really big life challenges that they're looking at. And
we want them to
how beautiful.
succeed. Yeah,
Exactly.
we want both to succeed, but humans are humans. And so one thing I like about working with kids is that they're at least honest. There's a lot of people pleasing when you're the teacher. I'm just like, let's just try to be honest. Okay. And I love that about kids. They'll tell you what they think.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. If you'd like to learn more about Allegra and her work, you can find her at allegrajordan.com. You've been listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, and we hope that you consider puppet power and how play and love can really change your relationship and your vitality for living. Thank you so much, Allegra, for this great conversation.
Same here. I'm very blessed for being in it. Thank you.